Next month we commemorate the 80th anniversary of one of the pivotal and most memorable moments of the Second World War. D-Day, Tuesday the 6th of June 1944. The invasion of Europe on the Normandy beaches was to lead to the liberation of France, which, in due course, laid the foundations to victory on the Western Front less than a year later. Anyone who has watched the opening scene of the film Saving Private Ryan as the landing crafts reach the beaches can get a feeling of the sheer horrors of war and the fear the young soldiers, some still in their teens, must have felt as bullets whistled past or found their target in the comrade beside them. Those fears of being cut down in your prime in a foreign land are, thanks to the brave sacrifices of our forefathers, something recent generations have not had to face. 300 miles away from the beaches of Normandy, another soldier was facing a fear, but in this case, his fate was much more certain. That morning, as the British Army's Royal Artillery began to bombard the German fortresses on the beaches, one member of their ranks was absent. There was no German bullet for this young gunner to face. Instead, the clock was counting down, minute by minute, for his cell door at London's Wandsworth jail to be opened and two fellow countrymen swiftly enter. There was to be no glory in the face of the enemy for this young soldier. Instead, just the ignominy of a felon's death at the end of the hangman's rope. Iris Miriam Deeley was an attractive 21-year-old with a pleasant, engaging smile and piercing blue eyes. The daughter of a bank manager, Miriam, as she preferred to be known, had been raised in the East London borough of Wanstead and on leaving school had followed in her father's footsteps and found a position with him as a clerk at the National Bank of India, Bishopsgate, in the financial district of the City of London. In 1942, deciding to do her bit for the country, she joined the Women's Auxiliary Air Force as a WAAF and following her basic training was soon sent to various parts of the country before a post to Cornwall in November 1943. It was here she met and fell in love with William Quill, a young radar engineer from Dublin who was training to be a pilot. With the military having scant consideration for the romance of two of their personnel, once Miriam received a promotion, she was posted back to London. As a leading aircraft woman, she was now to be based at RAF No. 1 Balloon Centre, Kidbrooke, south east of the river between Blackheath and Eltham. To cement their relationship, Marion and Bill decided to get engaged in January 1944, and just when they were wondering how they would manage the distance between them, Quill received his commission as a pilot officer. Not only did the promotion bring an increase in salary, but the new position saw him also posted to London, to the radio school in the Science Museum in Kensington for a period of training. With Miriam stationed about 10 miles away, it promised to make their relationship much easier as the austerity and hardships of war-ravaged London seemed to have no end. Miriam's parents immediately took to their prospective son-in-law, and Bill was welcome to stay with them at the family home at 29 Blakehall Road, Wanstead, during the course of his training. On Saturday, February the 12th, 1944, Miriam scored a weekend pass. To celebrate what would be their first Valentine's Day as a newly engaged couple, Miriam travelled back to her parents in Wanstead to be with their new fiancé. They spent the weekend together, with Miriam due back at base before midnight on Sunday evening. At 8:30 p.m, the couple left Wanstead, heading for the old Charing Cross station, now renamed Embankment, where Miriam planned to catch the 10 p.m. train to Kidbrooke. Leaving her parents' house, the couple set off on a 10-minute walk to the Green Man pub at Leytonstone, from where they would catch the 96 bus to the centre of London. As their time together was limited, Quill accompanied her on the bus ride, where, after seeing her onto the train, he would retrace his steps back to Wanstead. Travel in London during the war was often unpredictable, and due to the enforced blackout and with debris in the road from a recent bombing raid, by 10 p.m. the bus had barely travelled 5 miles. As they reached Bow Road, the driver stopped. Another air raid was in progress, and he told passengers he had been advised the road ahead was blocked and the bus was terminating here. Fortunately, trains out of Bow Road Underground Station were still running into the city, so with a copy of her library book, Tolstoy's War and Peace, in her hand, and some of his clothing coupons in her purse, Quill saw Marion safely on her way. Arriving at the Charing Cross Underground in good time, Marion sat in the adjacent YMCA cafe and opened the library book. So engrossed was she that when she next looked at her watch it was 11:01 and she had missed the last train to Kidbrooke. Scanning the departure board, she saw that there was a train at 11:25 that stopped at Lewisham, just over 2 miles from the base. A few minutes later, Marion telephoned the guardroom at RAF Kidbrooke. She said that due to the air raid, her journey had been interrupted and she was going to be delayed. Although she was likely to miss the midnight curfew, she apologised and said she would be there as soon as she could. She never arrived. On Monday morning, Valentine's Day 1944, Special Railway Constable Arthur Belcher was on his way to his allotment off Sherrard Road near Wellhall Station, Kidbrooke. As he approached his plot, he saw what appeared to be a pile of clothes. As he got closer, he could see that it was a WAAF's greatcoat, and on standing next to the coat, could see that beneath it was the body of a woman. Taking a closer look, he could see that a scarf was knotted tightly around her neck. Belcher shouted to attract the attention of a passer-by, and as he preserved the scene, the man hurried to the nearby police station. By 8:30, detectives from the Metropolitan Police Air Division, based at Eltham, along with the Divisional Police Surgeon, were examining what was clearly a murder scene. From marks along the soft ground, it appeared that the murder had taken place in one part of the field before the body had been dragged into a cabbage patch and covered with the coat, presumably in a vain attempt to hide the body. It seemed clear that this was a sexually motivated crime. The lower part of the woman's body was naked, while the top half remained clothed, suggesting the killer may have been disturbed. Before any investigation could begin, the police surgeon had to confirm that death had taken place. This formality was the same if the body had been dissected and buried for weeks or was still warm from a sudden death. The surgeon was able to say that he estimated she had been killed 7 to 9 hours earlier, but despite her being partially naked, there was no sign of any sexual assault or outrage. Scotland Yard were immediately called in, and a short time later, Detective Chief Inspector Ted Greenough crossed the city to handle the investigation. Closely examining the area, he could see that the earth around the murder scene was soft, and an imprint of a man's shoe, size 11, was clearly visible. He had one of his officers make a plaster cast of the footprint. A little further away in a field was a copy of a War and Peace library book, a woman's service cap, and caught on a branch by some bushes was a large soldier's khaki right-hand glove. There was, at this stage, no clue to the identity of the woman, and Greenough had the body removed to the mortuary for a formal post-mortem. As officers searched the field for clues, a schoolboy was making his way to the allotments when he noticed a piece of cloth. It was the pocket lining from the RAF greatcoat that had covered the body, and inside were 2 identity discs and a card that bore the name and number 2130707 LACW Iris Miriam Deeley. Greenough learned that she was stationed at RAF Kidbrooke and listed as absent after she had failed to return for the midnight curfew. Enquiries into her background soon led police to William Quill, studying on his course at the Science Museum. Totally oblivious to Miriam's death, Quill was asked by detectives if they could examine his shoes. They were not the size 11, and without further explanation, the officers left. While Quill was still wondering about the visit by the detectives, he was asked to take a call in the office at the museum. It was from Hazel Deeley, Miriam's younger sister. Like the detectives who had questioned him about the shoes, she was vague in her explanation, but asked if he could return to Wanstead immediately. It was as he travelled back on the train and spotted a newspaper headline that Quill had a foreboding of what had happened. On Tuesday, the post-mortem was carried out by pathologist Arthur Davis, who confirmed death was due to asphyxiation and Miriam had been strangled. Interestingly enough though, despite no sign of sexual interference, there was faint traces of semen on her body. Having spoken to her parents, they knew that Miriam had around £12 in cash and a silver cigarette case with the initials DD that her father, Donald, had given her. There was also a fountain pen and Bill Quill's clothing coupons. Having eliminated the immediate family and her fiancé as suspects, Greenough pondered the killer. As the murder had been estimated to have taken place around midnight, and with a khaki glove found at the scene, Greenough suspected the killer may be a serviceman out on a late pass or even a deserter. Detectives visited scores of Army and RAF camps, interviewing hundreds of military personnel, but it didn't provide any real leads other than Miriam had been spotted by 2 female officers from the Kidbrooke station at Charing Cross around 10:30 on Sunday night. Both said she had been sat reading her book. Then they heard from a Mrs. Margaret McGregor. She told detectives that she and her brother had travelled on the 11:25 train that had arrived at Lewisham at 11:40. Leaving the train, she remembered a well-spoken, attractive WAAF with a large book under her arm. Margaret said as they left the station they fell into conversation and it emerged all 3 were going to Kidbrooke. The journey was around 2.5 miles and in broad daylight would take less than an hour. However, the enforced blackout made the journey with the aim of a dim torch somewhat longer. They made their way down Lewisham High Street and as they approached Cheeseman's department store, a young soldier joined them. He said he was also heading that way and was invited to tag along. She was able to say that despite the darkness he had sandy hair, was sporting a moustache and there was something decidedly odd about his uniform. It was blazoned with various regimental flashes, a glider pilot's wings, PT instructor's badge along with ribbons and a number of old campaign medals. Also, more unusually, the tunic and trousers did not match. By the time they reached Blackheath, the soldier was talking to Miriam and they had dropped back slightly behind the other 2. On reaching Kidbrooke Park Road, with the RAF camp barely a 2-minute walk, Margaret and her brother bid them good night. She said as they parted she overheard Miriam agree to let the soldier walk her the final few hundred yards to the camp. And with this description, all the police forces in Britain and Ireland were alerted to be on the lookout for a soldier matching that description. On Friday, February the 18th, 1944, leading aircraft woman 2130707 Iris Miriam Deeley was laid to rest at Manor Park Cemetery in East London. Besides her distraught parents, 2 brothers and sister and fiancé were many colleagues and officials from her balloon station. Miriam was granted a funeral with full military honours. Meanwhile, the hunt for her killer continued. 4 days after Miriam was laid to rest, PC Charles Memory of the railway police stationed at St Pancras noticed an army sergeant and a WAAF kissing on the platform. PC Memory was an old soldier and a very observant railway policeman, and could see that the man was sporting a number of medals from the First World War, including the Afghan and Palestine campaigns. These were clearly decorations a man of his age would not have won in combat. Aware of the murder hunt for the soldier with a mismatched uniform and medals, when the girl had boarded her train, PC Memory stopped the man and spoke to him. He asked why he was wearing American Army trousers, and the soldier told him he had found them in Euston Road and they had replaced his own torn ones. In wartime London, with looting rife, stealing by finding was also a crime, and with the constable suspicious of his mannerisms, asked the soldier to accompany him to Albany Street Police Station. Asked to empty his pockets, among the items were a wallet, a fountain pen and a left luggage ticket. As a detective went to follow up the left luggage ticket, a call was put through to Chief Inspector Greenough at Eltham, and by 11 o'clock that morning he had arrived at the station. The man told the Scotland Yard detective his name was Ernest Kemp and he was a gunner in the Royal Artillery. A check soon revealed he was Ernest James Hangman Kemp and was currently a deserter from his unit. Kemp was 20-year-old and had been born illegitimately in Gillingham, Kent. His mother became invalided and he was still a child when she died. He then lived with his adopted parents in New Cross in South London. After leaving school he found work as a railway porter at New Cross Station and then later as a driver for the Whitbread's Brewery in and around Lewisham. In December 1942 he enlisted in the Queen's Royal Regiment, West Surrey, and after various postings around the UK, in November 1943 the regiment returned to London. He then transferred to the Royal Artillery and had postings in Scotland, Norfolk and finally at Woolwich. His military record was poor. He had deserted from his unit numerous times and also had a conviction for stealing a Home Guard uniform and, more tellingly, one of indecently assaulting a girl under the age of 16. He had been fined and bound over for that offence in the spring of 1943. It was while posted with B Battery at Woolwich Barracks that Kemp got into trouble for unlawfully wearing the uniform of an army captain. He was court-martialled and sentenced to 84 days in custody and a loss of 28 days' pay. At 2:15 on Tuesday afternoon, the 8th of February 1944, Kemp was being escorted for treatment at the Army Dental Centre in Cheltenham. Asked if he could go to lavatory, Kemp then escaped through a window and had been at liberty until he was picked up by PC Memory. As Greenough was questioning the suspect, the detective came back with the property recovered from the left luggage ticket. Here they were able to find a definite link to the murdered woman. Amongst the items in the kit bag were Kemp's army trousers and a clothing coupon in the name of Flight Officer Quill. Greenough asked him to account for his movements after he had escaped from the Army Dental Centre. Kemp said he had initially called at his aunt in New Cross, and most of the following week he was sleeping rough around London Bridge Station. On Saturday morning, February the 12th, he went to the Army and Navy stores and purchased some sergeant stripes and flashes which he had sewn onto his uniform by a tailor in the Waterloo Road. On the following day, Kemp told Greenough he left London Bridge Station and caught a train from Charing Cross to see his girlfriend at Erith. They later travelled back together into the city. At 9:30 they were at Waterloo. They then caught the 10 p.m. train to Erith, with Kemp sharing the first part of the journey with her before he disembarked at Deptford. His statement to Greenough then continued. "I came out of Deptford Station, walked up the High Street to a coffee stall in Broadway. I had a cup of tea and a cake and walked through Brookmill Road to Lewisham. It would then be about 11:10 and I went to the A1 Cafe. I had my supper there and left about 11:45. There was nobody in the cafe I knew except the chap behind the counter. He knows me as a regular. I left the cafe at 11:45 and a soldier and an ATS came by and I said good night to them. Shortly afterwards, a man and a woman in civilian clothes and a WAAF came along from the direction of Lewisham Station. The man said, 'Where are you going, Tommy?' I said, 'I'm going to Woolwich.' The man said, 'We're going towards Blackheath to Kidbrooke. We've lost our train. Did you lose yours?' I walked with them alongside the man up Belmont Hill. The WAAF was carrying a book under her arm. During the walk there was just a casual conversation. The WAAF said she was going to Kidbrooke where she was training. I walked with them as far as Kidbrooke Church where the police box is. The civilians left and told us to go straight on. I asked the WAAF if she would like me to walk with her and she said, 'Yes, I don't mind your company as long as you're not putting yourself out.' I walked on with the WAAF towards the bridge near the railway. A man came off the track. I was under the impression he may have been a Home Guard. I asked him, 'Which is the way to Kidbrooke Camp?' He said, 'Through the passageway by the railway, turn to the right when you get to the end and you'll be near enough there.' I walked with the WAAF to the arch over the railway nearby and left her there. She said she would be all right and walked on." Greenough asked him to explain the articles found on him. Kemp said he had the wallet for a year and had the fountain pen he had bought in Lewisham. The clothing coupon he had purchased from the A1 Cafe the day after the murder. Later that evening, Greenough interviewed Kemp again, asking for his boots. Measured, they were found to be size 11 and fitted the plaster cast perfectly. Kemp was then charged with the murder of Miriam Deeley. Following his arrest, Kemp was driven to Eltham in the police car and said, "I deserve all I am going to get." He then made a further statement. "I thought you must have known I haven't told you the truth. I don't know what came over me and made me do it. I will tell you what happened. She didn't have a chance. It was my fault. As soon as I tightened the scarf, she seemed to go out. She would not submit to me at all." At 9:20, a formal written statement was taken by Detective Sergeant Hodge at Eltham Police Station. Kemp said that after they'd been stopped by the Home Guard, the man simply shone his torch up and down and allowed them on. Kemp, who knew the area well from his time as a delivery driver, pretended he didn't and was heading towards the allotments. As they approached down the deserted walkway, Kemp began touching Miriam's breasts. "Don't do that," she protested. When they reached the end of the allotments by the wooden gate, Kemp said he put his right arm behind her, his right hand over her mouth, and pulled her down. She tried to struggle and said, "You wouldn't do this if you had a sister." Kemp said he then laid her on the ground and began undressing her by undoing the coat from the top. It was then that Kemp noticed she had a scarf on. As Miriam continued to struggle, he grabbed the scarf, twisting it tightly. He said that Miriam passed out and then died. Then Kemp took off her overcoat, skirt, stockings, suspenders and underwear, and although he undid his trousers and lay on top of her, he didn't actually rape or have sex with Miriam. Fearing someone would see her half-naked body in the morning, he covered it with an overcoat. He then stole what few possessions Miriam had before fleeing the scene, casually throwing away the identity card on discs. Following a brief appearance at Greenwich Magistrates Court, Kemp was remanded in Brixton Prison for a trial to take place at the Old Bailey in April. His trial lasted one day, on April the 18th, and was before Mr Justice Cassels. Mr Heffes Lawton KC, representing Kemp, said his client pleaded not guilty to murder but guilty to manslaughter. Kemp admitted the killing, but Lawton argued that he neither intended to kill or cause serious harm to Miriam Deeley. Mr L.A. Byrne KC said that the Crown rejected this, and this was a case of willful murder committed in the furtherance of a sexual act. The judge then explained to the jury the law of murder in regard to intent. This was the natural consequences of a deliberate act, in this case the pulling of the scarf, rather than intent, meaning a desire to kill or cause serious harm. Then Mr Cassels stated that under the doctrine of constructive malice, if the jury were satisfied Kemp killed Miriam Deeley even accidentally during rape or an attempt to rape, or if Kemp contemplated either act, then intent was irrelevant, he was guilty of murder. The jury took just 16 minutes to find Kemp guilty as charged, but they added a recommendation of mercy on account of his youth and on the grounds that they believed the murder to be unpremeditated and unintentional. Mr Cassels donned the black cap and sentenced Kemp to hang. On Monday the 22nd of May, Kemp appeared at the appeal court, claiming that in the intent required to prove murder, Mr Justice Cassels had misdirected the jury, that Kemp's statement that he only pulled the scarf to stop Miriam screaming was irrelevant. Mr Lawton maintained it was for the jury, not the judge, to decide what to disregard in Kemp's statement. The court, headed by Lord Goddard, quickly dismissed the appeal, saying that the judge was right to tell the jury to ignore what Kemp intended, as the killing was clearly done to further a rape or attempted rape. While in the death cell, Kemp was examined by 3 Home Office doctors, all of whom concluded Kemp was sane, with one adding that having observed Kemp at Brixton, he was completely unemotional and was only casually sorry that he had killed Miriam. Although the jury had recommended mercy, since the killing was in the furtherance of rape and the gunner had been absent without leave at the time of the murder, Home Secretary Mr Herbert Morrison declined to interfere with the course of the law. On Tuesday the 6th of June, as the direction of the war was about to turn in France, Ernest Kemp, accompanied by Hangman Albert Pierpoint and his assistant Herbert Morris, from the condemned cell to the gallows at Wandsworth Jail. Being a stocky 5 foot 10 inches tall and weighing over 13.5 stone, Pierpoint gave him a drop of 5 feet 11, long enough to cause a dislocation of the 3rd and 4th vertebra and fracture the thyroid bone. Keeping a photograph of Miriam in his wallet, William Quill survived the war. He returned to Dublin and married in 1956. Ernest Kemp is today commemorated on the memorial at the Brookwood Military Cemetery in Woking, Surrey, one of almost a score of serving military personnel who committed murder and subsequently, as a result of their actions, lost their lives during wartime. The cemetery is dedicated to those whom the fortune of war denied a known and honoured grave. But Ernest James Herman Kemp does have a grave. His body lies in plot 58 in the unconsecrated ground behind the grim walls of Wandsworth Jail. Due to some ignorance or error at the War Office, Ernest Kemp is listed as a war hero, missing in action during the Normandy D-Day invasion. A false and far more worthy epitaph than this brutal sex killer deserved. Thank you for watching and listening to this episode of Tales from the Hangman's Record. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you don't already. Your support really is important to help keep the channel growing. Check out my website stevefielding.com for information on my books and for links to all the other videos in this series. The website shop also sells copies of the Hangman's Record 3-volume series plus assorted older titles. We also have copies of volumes 1 and 2 of Tales from the Hangman's Record paperback. This is also available as a Kindle download from Amazon. Check out my podcast channel, Mostly Murder, which features a variety of true crime cases and is available on Spotify and all the usual platforms. Also keep an eye out for a new YouTube channel and book series, Crime Casebook, coming this summer, which will feature various true crime cases from around the world and across the ages. Do you agree the verdict was correct, and was Kemp guilty as charged and deserved to hang for his crime? Use the comments below for your thoughts on this case and for suggestions for further episodes in the Tales from the Hangman's Record series. So, until next time, thank you and goodbye.